Born at some point in the early 750s, Irene would become one of the most famous women in Byzantine history. Her career would include blinding, eventually killing her own son, usurping him on the throne, and an attempt to marry Charlemagne. Irene married the Byzantine Emperor Leo IV, and in 771 produced him an heir, the future Constantine VI, who was named after his grandfather. In May 776, Irene's husband Leo survived a plot against him, and he sent his enemies into exile and into monasteries. The following year, Leo married off one of Irene's cousins to the Bulgar Khan. Leo IV died of a fever in 780, leaving his 9-year-old son Constantine as the new emperor and Irene in a crucial position as regent. Irene and her son were vulnerable, and almost straight away they were threatened by a revolt, challenging their rule, which sought to put the boy's uncle Nikephoros on the throne instead. Irene dealt with the revolt, and like Leo had done, sent the rebels into exile. There were external threats too, and that year Irene directed a force to go and engage Arab forces that threatened the empire. The Arabs were defeated, and Constantine and Irene's rule, so far, had got off to a good start. Irene first sought an alliance with the King of the Franks, Charles, in the early 780s, seeking to marry her son to one of Charlemagne's daughters. An engagement was made, but would be broken off by Irene, who would instead marry Constantine to a daughter of a nobleman. Constantine wasn't happy with these developments and divorced his new wife pretty much straight away. In 782, the Byzantine and Arabs come to blows again, but after something of a stalemate, Irene was obliged to make peace, demonstrating diplomatic qualities needed in a ruler or regent. Her son, still hardly in his teens at this stage, Irene had to demonstrate strong leadership qualities in volatile times for the empire. By 790, Constantine was now a young man and at the age where he was ready to rule, but found himself dictated to by powerful men around him. He sought to break away from their control by sharing power with his mother, but by this point Irene had a firm grip on power herself and on her son, and tried to force the army to swear loyalty to her rather than Constantine. However, they gave mixed messages, switching allegiances far too readily. Constantine was now growing into the role of emperor, and personally led expeditions against the Bulgars and the Arabs in 792. The treacherous imperial guards, however, sought to replace him as emperor, and Constantine was forced to act swiftly, mutilating his enemies in cruel fashion. Irene had been involved in weeding out the conspirators, informing Constantine of the plot against him. In early 797, Irene began to make her move to claim sole power, bribing and sweet-talking key figures over to her cause. It seems to me Irene had always had one eye on power, and through the 790s there had been warning signs that she was trying to move Constantine out of the way, and so it proved. In 797, Irene ordered her son to be blinded, from which he'd never recover and would die shortly after. Rebellion was rife against Irene after her usurpation of the throne, and in 798 she had her own nephew blinded. I suppose after blinding your own son, a woman like Irene would have no scruples doing it to her nephew as well. In 801, Irene tried to marry Charlemagne, who had been crowned Holy Roman Emperor the year before, but it didn't come to pass. In 802, one of the key political figures in Irene's government, a man by the name of Nikephoros, conspired against her. Picking his moment well, as Irene's health now was in rapid decline, and sent her off into exile, where she would die the following year, and he had himself crowned Nikephoros I. Irene, throughout her career, had demonstrated the skills that would have been required in a capable ruler: a strong character, an ability for diplomacy, and organising military responses when and where required in the empire. However, the murder of her own son was a completely monstrous act, and the fact that her reign lasted as long as 5 years, considering the circumstances she usurped the throne in, and the fact she was also a woman who usurped the throne, makes that something of a miracle.